He can claim whatever he wants, and he can get punched in the mouth by the right people at the right time. None of that affects me. Welcome to Northwoods Kindred. I'm your Gothi Bodvarr, and on this channel we discuss all things Asatru Kindred related. So hit that subscribe button if you want to see how we do it in the Northwoods. On this video, we're going to talk about doing research, individual research for gods and deities so that you can perform ritual in their honor. But before we get to that, I have a couple of small points that I want to make. One is the historic role of the Gothi isn't some shamanic role where you had to earn your way into it or be touched in order to have it. It was considered property, and it could be bought, sold, traded, or inherited, and the role of the Gothi was passed around to people who did not necessarily know how to do it until they were placed in that role and forced to do the job, much like a lot of the Gothi that do the job today. My goal with this video series is to just help those that, for one reason or another, ended up in the Gothi role and help them to understand the job a little bit better and to be a little bit more efficient as they learn to lead and mentor their kindred in their own special way. Now, this program is absolutely free. Just watch the videos and share them with your friends. But there are a couple of ways to pay us back if you feel like you got a lot of value out of it and you want to return that. Because this isn't free for us to give away. We do have to pay for various hostings and other expenses in order to just give this away. So if you want to do that, there will be downloads attached to each of these files. You can take notes and not need the downloads, or you can download them and not take notes, or you can do both, which would be my suggestion. The notes will be available for $1 or $2 on our website for download, and once again, that helps pay and offset the cost of all of this. Another way is to join our Patreon community and get a couple of extra perks and bonuses, but nothing that you would need in order to be functional as a kindred leadership. Also, check out the link below and bounce over to our Discord. Say hi to everybody. We have one of the friendliest, most open Discord communities that there is in the Norse community right now, and it's a great place to learn and ask questions, as well as have access to myself and Gothi School. Also on Wednesday, following the drop of a video, we're going to try to go live at 5 o'clock California time, and then just kind of discuss any topics in the video and answer any questions you might have. And last thing, I discussed this in the last video. If you are in the role of a Gothi already, if you've fallen in that role with your kindred, go online to Universal Life Church, ULC, and we're not affiliated with them at all. They're probably going to be surprised to even hear me mention their name. Go get ordained, file the paperwork, get ordained, and then go into their special certificates and get yourself a certificate that says you are hereby nominated a Gothi or a Gidya in Universal Life Church. Those two certificates will be valuable for you if you end up having to perform a wedding, or you end up in a situation where you need some sort of a credential. That'll be your credential. Nobody else's credentials are any more legitimate than that. I want to tell you that right now. Also, I'm getting some concern about who can and can't call themselves a Gothi, and because people are concerned that they might watch these videos and then all of a sudden say that they're a Gothi. That's not the goal here. I don't really care, and I don't have any say over who calls themselves a Gothi and who doesn't. People can call themselves whatever they want. It's just an empty title if you don't have a kindred to lead. So if the kindred calls someone a Gothi, then they're a Gothi. I don't care if they're a 16-year-old high school kid and he and 5 of his friends go behind the football field every day and do a bloat to Njord, then he's the Gothi, as long as they recognize him as such. As far as I'm concerned, that's all it takes. You are a Gothi if you are doing Gothi work for people. So I just want to make that point that don't gatekeep the title. The title was never gatekeeped. It was really easy to pass around like a toy. And it shouldn't be something we gatekeep now in the modern era just because we put a value on it. Along the same lines as those that put on a uniform and go do stolen valor. I served 20 years in the Marine Corps, majority of that as a scout sniper and scout sniper instructor. Because that guy sitting at the bar claims to be a scout sniper and he's not, it doesn't take anything away from what I've done. He can claim whatever he wants and he can get punched in the mouth by the right people at the right time. None of that affects me. That's the way we have to look at these titles of Gothi, Gidya, Vidki, Volva, and anything else that we come up with in the Norse community. Now, this video, we're going to talk about individual research on gods, goddesses, other supernatural creatures, and whoever you happen to be venerating, like Whites or Disa or Totterman. There's a way to do research to pull the right bits of information so that you can pay them the most possible respect, as well as get their the best energy that they want to give to us for that exchange. When it comes to creating powerful, meaningful rituals for you and your kindred, it's important to understand the aspects of the deity that we're asking to come and exchange energies with us, especially when we're working with a powerful god like Odin, who can influence not only physical energy, but spiritual energies as well. So in order to deliver this program about how to do the research, we're going to use Odin as our example so I can do the research on Odin. So you'll get twofold from this one. You'll get a lot of good information about venerating Odin and doing ritual to him, as well as the process of doing the research in the first place. Understanding the god or goddess or the deities before doing ritual is very important. And the way we understand them is we go over the things that they're known for, like their personality traits, their stories, the sagas that contain them. We talk about the tools, the weapons, and the equipment that they use. We talk about their homeland and the role that they fill in the Norse pantheon. If you don't really understand the deity before you invoke them for certain rituals and customs, it's really just a mechanical operation. If you don't know a lot about them, if you don't feel a heartfelt connection to Odin or Frey or Frigga when you invite them into your home and into your stead, that connection's not going to be there if you're just inviting them mechanically because you think that that's the process that has to be done. Therefore, it's important that when we start researching the deities that we do it with a kind of an open and a respectful attitude, but we got to have an open mind about who they are as well. So when we read their stories, we don't try to make that fit our own little special mold that we want to jam that god or goddess into. We get to just experience the story and let them create their own outline. If you can do that, then you can conduct a more meaningful and energetic ritual that has a real deep spiritual connection, not only to your folk, but to the divine as well. Now, in order to really understand the god or goddess or the deity, the divine, we'll call it, it's important to understand their background. And we do this by diving into any of the literature that we have that may cover them. Now, Odin is an easy deity to research because Odin is all over the place. He's all over the literature. He's in practically every story. There is no lack of documentation on all the different facets that is Odin. Now, according to the creation stories in the lore, Odin, along with his brothers Vili and Ve, are the sons of Bor and Besla, and they killed the giant Ymir, and from him created the heaven and the earth. So Odin's been around since the very, very beginning, but he takes a lot of different roles throughout his saga and his lifetime. And some of those roles are contradictory to each other, so if you want to invoke Odin for ritual, you have to know what those roles are and invoke the right Odin. And he has well over 200 names, so you should invoke the right Odin with the right name according to the personality that you're trying to invoke for your ritual. And the only way you know that is by studying his stories. Odin is also the husband of Frigg, and he is the father of some of the most notable gods in the pantheon, like Hodir and Thor and Balder. Odin is very often portrayed as a powerful god, but very wise, the god of kings, they say. He's also known for his abilities to shape the future, as well as his shamanic practices. He's usually depicted with two ravens, Hugin and Munin, meaning thought and memory. Arguably, they could be anxiety for the future and regret over the past. So Odin could be tortured by those two ravens as well as they could be his helpers. And those are the kind of things you need to keep an open mind to when you read the stories and you understand what those ravens are giving him. Thought and memory. Odin is also known to travel the 9 worlds on his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir. Some say that 8-legged horse is representative of a coffin carried by 4 men, and that's how he transitions via death through various different worlds. Odin has an important role as the patriarch of the Norse pantheon. Now, he is not the father of all the gods, but he is known as the father of the gods because he is their patriarch and their father figure and their chieftain and their king. He's also known pretty well for his willingness to do anything for knowledge, including personal ordeal, such as plucking out his own eye for a drink from Mimir's well, or hanging himself from the Yggdrasil in order to capture the runes, for which he is very well known as the originator of the runes, the one who shared them with all the other creatures in existence, and eventually they made their way to mankind as well. Now, I'm not going to go all the way down the whole page, but I will say that the download is going to be substantially larger, and it has a lot of little points about Odin that I've derived while I was reading his stories and digging around on the net and digging around through my books and finding these little bits and pieces that were very specific to Odin. And a good way to do that is to have yourself a digital format book, like a Kindle. And I don't mean one where you can read scanned in PDFs, because you can't search those. But if you download a Kindle book and pay $2 or $3 for it, you can search the entire book for Odin, and it'll give you a reference to every single time Odin's name is mentioned. And that's a really good way to pull out massive amounts of information to do your research. And if you do your research thoroughly one time, like this, and add it into your book, you should only have to go review it. You shouldn't have to do all of that work every single time until it's committed to memory. So on this list, I'll just kind of give you some ideas as to what my bullet points are. It'll say that Odin played a significant role in the culture and the religion as the chief of the gods, because he was seen as powerful and wise, and the kings would want to earn his favor. One of Odin's roles in Viking culture is that he was a fierce warrior, and therefore he's the patron of fierce warriors, and even Berserker and Ufendar as well, the fiercest, arguably, warriors on the battlefield, all dedicated to Odin as the warrior or the chief of warriors. Odin is also very closely related with magic and sorcery, and even Seithr, which would be female magic, but Odin was considered to be wise in that discipline as well, and some men followed suit and learned that level of feminine magic also during the Viking Age. It wasn't common, but those persons would have certainly chosen Odin as some sort of a patron or a guide. And Odin was also revered as a god of poetry, wisdom, and inspiration. So poets, skalds, those that used their brain to function, not just their muscles, would also pay a lot of attention to Odin and ask for his inspiration and his guidance and his acceptance and help. And overall, Odin played a really important role to our ancestors in Viking, and even before and after in that culture, because he sort of espoused the whole of what it was to be a good Viking. One person could be a stout fighter, one could be a good poet, but few were both. And even fewer were also leadership and capable of doing other things like magic works. So he was the perfect example of what everybody should strive to be during the Viking Age. Now, another part of the research, once we learn their stories and learn the different personalities of a god or goddess, we have to learn what other symbols are associated with them. Of course, we all know the Thor's hammer associated with Thor, but what's associated with Odin? What are some symbols that we can take from these stories and items that he used, or items that are very closely tied to him, and use those in our own ritual practices? That'd be the next thing that we want to research. So things that are associated with Odin are, first and foremost, Gungnir, his spear, which is said to always hit the mark when it's thrown. Another of Odin's famed items is Draupnir. That went to hell with Balder. There's a whole story behind that. Ravens and wolves are very closely associated with Odin, as are horses and travelers, because he's a wanderer and he's known far and wide as the master of the best horse in all the lands. His throne is Lidskjalf. His hall is Valhall. There are many more things associated with Odin, and I would really encourage you to dive into the lore, read about Odin, and discover what some of those things are, and then put the pieces together and figure out how to use them in ritual. Now, after we understand some of the stories, and we understand some of the tools and equipment, we want to try and put this god, goddess, or deity into a historical context. How were they honored in history? Or if they were historical figures, how were they honored in their own lifetime? Now, the Viking Age is where we generally put our focus, but that was a very short period in Nordic history and Nordic culture. And there's been a lot of evolution of the cultures from the Stone Age through to modern times. So whichever deity you're venerating, know when they had their heyday in the Northland. There are times when Odin was the most venerated god, and there's times and places where Frey was, or Thor, or Ullr, or even Tyr. It's important to know the place, locations, and the time in the period in history when the people venerated those gods or goddesses the most, or was very common, because that's going to give you a better understanding of what it is that that deity does for the people, based on the needs of the people during that period in history. Also understand that through the majority of human history, religion and life were not separate pieces. In the modern era, religion is more control. I think it's more closely related to politics than it really is to daily living. Most people aren't going to die if they don't go to church, and they'll still be able to feed their family. It wasn't always like that through human history. Religion was incorporated into daily life. Honoring the gods and giving them their cut of the spoils was as real a thing as getting in your car and driving to work is nowadays. It was just part of life. And so when you look at different periods in history and look at which gods were venerated during those periods, it's going to give you some insight into the day-to-day struggles of those people. A good example, there are times when the Vikings were settling down and not so much raiding and trading, but they're settling down and they're farming. In these periods of history, Frey, a patron of the earth, of farming, of growth, was venerated more than, say, someone who is more warlike, such as Odin or Thor. And a good example of that is the amount of people that venerate Loki in modern times compared to ancient times. We live in different times and we have vastly different challenges to face on a day-to-day basis than our ancestors did. And another thing that we should consider is that religious practices evolved over time. Now, we don't get the benefit of that, but for a majority of Earth's religions that were around back then that are still around today, they've changed dramatically to keep up with the times and the social norms and the customs and what is, there are things that the church was 100% for 1,000 years ago that are appalling right now. So there are things that the Vikings may or may not have done during their lifetime that would be appalling now, whereas back then they were just parts of daily life. So we have to understand that we don't have the benefit in Asatru that our religion was afforded the chance to evolve with all the other religions of the planet. So we are picking it up with as much pieces as we can put together from 1,000 years ago, and we're trying to build something that's applicable to today. So you can study the evolution of the religions up until the points where they disappeared. And I use that as a plural because everybody's calling this path something else. Everybody's on their own journey. So we all have the same problem. And the problem is that we're picking it up from the past, we're planting it firmly in the future, and we're trying not to change it in the process. But we have to change it. We have to make sure that it evolves with us. Odin's role in 2023 is different than Odin's role in 793. Hey folks, I want to say thanks for hanging out for the whole video. I know that it seemed a little incomplete. This is part of a two-part series. When we first shot it, we expected to get it all into one series, but it just seemed to be too much information, too much data, and it ended up being a 40-minute video. So we chopped it into two 20-minute videos, make it a little bit easier to absorb the information, a little bit easier to take notes and everything. But the handout, the download, if you choose to go download that from the website, it's going to cover both this video and the next video because they're two parts to the same information packet. I hope that's not too confusing, and I hope that you benefit from it. So we'll see you on the next one. Thor Vigi, my friends.